Our children need to learn how to use technology. They need to, I think, have a break from it during their time in school so they're not constantly on the tech, because that is part of their world and it is not going away. So actually school is a brilliant time to have a break from it, but they will need concentrated lessons where they are on it because they're being taught how to use it, program it, how to fix bugs, educating our children on how to control technology, develop technology, and be the human in the driving seat of it, because it's coming along in the passenger seat no matter what. But let's keep it in the passenger seat and not let it take over. Positively educating our children around this is absolutely key.
This is the Born to be Brilliant podcast, helping you harness the habits and unlock the tools to bring you more meaning, vibrance, and the personal power to help you shine like the diamond you are.
Our education system is broken. It was built for an industrial world that just doesn't exist anymore. So why does this matter to the next generation, to us as entrepreneurs who are raising the next generation, and to the whole concept of high performance and how the next generation are going to come through this education system and make a difference in this world? I feel really passionately about this, and I know many of you are parents as well, and it's frustrating to say the least. We went through a period of time when they couldn't go into school and we had to facilitate their education at home, and I think that pulled back the curtain on a lot of things for a lot of people, and with that lots of people left the mainstream education system and lots of people went into homeschooling because they thought, I can do this. I also know a lot of people that thought, oh my God, I'll never can do this. This is awful. I couldn't possibly imagine it. I was one of those people at that point. I was thinking, I couldn't do that. It's another thing to juggle. But I've come around to I get it now, and I get why people do, and I get why people take it into their own hands. I wouldn't be able to be my children's full-time teacher, but I certainly believe 100% confidently that I could orchestrate their education really well, that I could manage it, I could map it out, and I could set it up and go, right, this is how we're going to learn, what we're going to learn, who's going to teach you. I feel like I could create a bespoke education package. Absolutely. And I think I could do that really, really well. And it's frustrating because let's just actually talk about what this education system looks like. If you're in the UK and listening to this from the UK, you'll know what that looks like. And I can't speak for every country around the world, but it's geared up to the industrial age, right? And it's not changed in decades. So even when I left school far too long ago, even then, the education system was teaching and educating children to move into a world where, you narrow down the subjects you study, you specialize in something and you get a job, and then you work your way up, and that's called the career ladder. And then you stay in it for years and years and years and years. Now, and for a very long time, that hasn't been the way things work. People don't stay in one career for years and years. In fact, it's almost advisable not to. And even the thought that a child in school today gets asked what do they want to be or what do they want to do when they grow up, and I just think that's awful. It's like, what do you feel like doing first? Where do you want to start? What's a good starting point? What's the next door you want to open? Sure. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? And most importantly, who do you want to become? So when we look at an education system that sets kids up for, or hasn't, let's just say not even what it does, it's the fact that it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed in all these years. It isn't and hasn't been gearing our future generation up for the world we are in now, let alone setting them up and preparing them for the world that they're going to go into when they leave school, because it isn't even going to look like it looks today. And we're going through one of the most rapid periods of change that humanity has seen. Some argue that since we invented fire, or since we discovered fire. Now imagine that, the size of that in terms of change for how we exist and operate as a species. There's a whole nother conversation. But keeping that in line with this education system piece and raising the next generation, what are we teaching them and why? And how are we actually preparing them? Now, I believe wholeheartedly that we should continue to teach children how to learn. We need to know how to learn. We need to practice learning. So to some extent, you could say, well, it doesn't really matter what. Just in the same concept that older people, sometimes if they know about this, they will keep their brain sharp by doing Sudoku and crossword puzzles because it keeps their brain sharp. And that's a good thing to do. We want to keep our brain sharp. And so problem solving is great. And we need to learn how to learn. That's really important. So to remain able to learn, to receive information, to process information, to use our brains is absolutely vital. And we don't want to stop using our brains by any stretch of the imagination. In the same sense that older people will sometimes go and do, Sudokus and crossword puzzles and things like that to challenge their brains and keep their brains sharp. I understand that and think there's a validity to that in terms of our brain exercises and problem solving. I'm one of the many people who has historically said, oh, why learn algebra? When are you ever going to use that in life? And I think there's more to just what you're going to use in life, okay? You probably won't. There's, how many people ever have used algebra? A very small portion, I would have thought. So it's not about the fact that it's a skill you're going to use in your career or in the real world. It's about the fact that you're exercising your brain and you're working something out and using a logic and a format and a formula and calculation that you will apply to something completely different. Completely different types of calculating and things like that. But it's the fact that you can stretch the brain and your ability in that way. That's the point. But tell kids that, why don't kids know that? If kids understood that, if they're an age they're doing algebra, they're old enough to understand this conversation. Like if you told them, you're never going to use this in the real world. That's not the purpose of this right now. This is why we're learning this, and this is what it's going to do for you. In the same sense that, you get these games on your phone and like IQ tests and things like that. It's like, okay, we're going to do algebra for that reason. Then it becomes more fun and you can make it fun, which leads me on to my next point. In typical education systems today, they're still designed in a sit down on your bottom in a chair facing the front where somebody's going to speak at you. Best, they might ask a question or two or put something on a board for you to look at, but it isn't often that engaging or interactive. Sometimes it is. I can think of the difference between the teachers that do and don't do that is immense. I turned an E grade to a B grade in a subject within a year just because of the change in teacher. It went from an A to an E to a B or something like that. Because I was enthusiastic, I was passionate, I was good at it, and I was doing really well. And then I had a teacher that lost me. I mean, so boring, unengaging. So of course I switched off because that doesn't work for me. And then I was like, no, this can't be. I'm really good at this subject. Change of teacher, change of environment, reinvigorated, and boom, pulled grade back up again. It makes a huge difference. And I know I'm somebody who needs that. Like I thrive from engaging, interactive, animated. You got to be doing. Just being talked at doesn't work for me. But it does work for some people. And the problem is we have to have an education system that works for the masses because we can't cater to every single learning style. We can't go, right, so your kinesthetic learners go over here, your auditory learners go over here, your visual learners, you're going to go and do it this way. We don't have the capacity to do that. We have to kind of go with the majority, right? But my argument is surely the majority don't just want to sit there and be talked at. Surely that isn't the best way for the majority. It's just easiest. It's just the easiest to execute. It's, I want to say, almost lazy. Like it takes a lot more passion and thought to structure teaching when it goes beyond just the teaching, because it isn't just teaching. It isn't just a passing of information. I'm going to teach you this thing. That's teaching. But then the delivery, like that's when you need to be a performer. How are you going to perform that? How are you going to get up there in front of your audience and perform that in a way that they go away and they've learned something? That's what it's like in my world. If I go and speak on a stage, if I just get up there and speak, I can share something really valuable. But if it's not going to land and it's not going to transform their lives, it's not going to make an impact unless I know how to perform it in a way that delivers. And some teachers have that nailed. Like I've memories of various things that teachers did that I will still remember now. And I'll tell you why I remember, because it stood out. Because it was like a pattern interrupt. They say shock is one of the best ways to get students to learn. And when one of my teachers walked into the room and started singing a line of a song because the ending was the thing that was relevant to the thing we were learning, everyone was like, they were listening. And I remember it now. So being a bit different, doing stuff differently, and getting kids and young adults, infused and engaged, I think the majority will learn better that way. And the sort of the shy, reserved ones that prefer to just sit quietly at a desk, well, maybe it will help bring something out of them as well. So that's one thing, and how I just think that's just in terms of the delivery of the education, and that I think it is really mundane. How many kids say school's boring? Most of them. I don't think anyone goes through their entire school life without thinking it or feeling it at least once. And for some, it's all there. It's their only narrative. It needs to change. So back to what we teach them. Some of it is pointless, but it has a point in terms of exercising brain. Some of it is just pointless, and some of it's missing. So how do we readdress and restructure what we're actually putting into our kids' minds? I certainly don't think that we should be sharing things as fact when they're not fact. They're maybe opinion or an idea of, because I think that's indoctrination. And I think sometimes kids are taught stuff in schools that, it's history as we know it, but there could be other answers. Do you know what I mean? It's like, as far as we know this, or, there are loads of things that are like that, where it's like, this isn't 100% definitive, but as far as we know this, how many times has Pluto been a planet and then not a planet, and so on? Do you know what I mean? I think there are certain things that we don't definitely know the answers on, and creating curiosity in our children is far better than just trying to condition them to this is this and this is this and that's the way it is. It's like, but maybe this. I mean, how amazing if you go, we have this much evidence to say this, but there's some theories that this, and what do you think? And opening up their minds, that's got to be better for the future. Now, speaking of the future, most jobs that our children today know of will be gone in the next decade, and even more beyond that. But that's okay. So whilst the world is freaking out, oh my God, all the jobs are going to be taken by technology and there will be nothing left for us to do. I think, and this is another podcast, but I think there's an opportunity here for technology to take and lift some of the strain off of humanity, allowing humanity to get back to what we really are at our core and who we really are as a species, who aren't trying to survive and do all these things to survive. So I've used this analogy a few times lately, but it just feels like it makes sense. We invented automobiles and vehicles, and that didn't mean that we don't walk anymore. You could have said, oh no, we're never going to walk again, and we're going to seize up because we're going to drive everywhere, and what are we going to become if we're always driving cars and not walking? Has that ever been a problem? No, because now, instead of, I think I used this literally on another podcast recently, so forgive me, but it's so relevant here. Instead of developing back problems and leg problems and, blisters and pains because we've had to walk miles and miles and miles and spend hours and hours and hours just to get ourselves from A to B, we can now get ourselves from A to B quickly. We can tick that box, but we can now walk for pleasure, for recreation. We can move our bodies in different ways, and actually in ways that are more intentional and concentrated for health and wellness benefits, rather than from necessity and survival and those sorts of things. So the invention of the thing didn't take something away from us. It allowed us something better. And I think that we could apply that to lots of things. We already have dishwashers that wash our dishes. We don't need to wash our dishes. It's the same. Great. So if we have a robot housekeeper that's vacuuming our floors and ironing our shirts, is that oh no, I'm going to forget how to do that? So I can forget how to do that and still have a great life. Truth is, if we really need to know how to do it, we could do it. And do we want to teach the kids how to do it? Well, if you want, sure. But they may never need to, so there's bigger fish to fry out there, right? What we can actually then do, as we're alleviated from some of these things, is channel our capacity into things that are around imagination and creativity and connection. So how are we teaching our kids this in school? Because otherwise I'm going to go off onto a whole different style podcast about the future and AI. In this context, education, what Like, our children need to learn how to use technology. They need to, I think, have a break from it during their time in school, so they're not, constantly on the tech, because that is part of their world and it is not going away. So actually, school is a brilliant time to have a break from it, but they will need concentrated lessons where they are on it, because they're being taught how to use it, how to program it, how to fix bugs, how to, educating our children on how to control technology, develop technology, and be the human in the driving seat of it, because it's coming along in the passenger seat no matter what. But let's keep it in the passenger seat and not let it take over. Positively educating our children around this is absolutely key. And forest school and getting outside and getting into nature. Why isn't yoga a lesson in every school in the school day? You go to assembly to sit on your bum and have someone talk at you. Why don't you go to yoga? Why is that not in the routine every day? Doing yoga, breathing, realigning our nervous system, soothing, like, what great skills. Those are life skills. They're going to need those skills in this world. And if they're doing that from a young age and they're regulating themselves energetically from a young age, then they're going to stop having problems like anxiety and, well, maybe not. I'm not saying stop. It's not going to make it all go away, but surely it's going to help and be beneficial around, stress management and relationships and connection. Why is that not built in? PSHE teaches random stuff about relationships, but what about proper connection, human connection, in a world where everybody has a device now, like, close to them, and not too far away it will be physically in them? Like, this isn't going to go away. So why aren't we learning about human connection? Why aren't we learning about love languages? Why are we learning about how I have these values and other people have different values, and that's okay? When I'm in this environment, or, when I'm communicating, I need to learn how to communicate with the person in front of me in a way that works for them. If I'm in a family or a relationship, I need to learn how to support those around me and not just be out for myself. This would transform, how friendship groups work. It would help young people to go out there into the world and create better relationships that create more advancement in career paths, because they'll know how to communicate and how to create connection. And it's the thing that we as humans need and are craving more than ever. And it's the thing that one thing that we are a pack species. We don't go it solo. We don't survive on our own. We survive in communities and in numbers. So teaching our young people how to be part of that. Some will be leaders. Some will not be leaders, but they'll be integral parts of communities. Identity. Why aren't we teaching our kids about identity, understanding who they are and who they want to be, and how to lean into who they are and love who they are? Self-love. Like, I think it's probably the biggest thing that's destroyed in our school years, because we're desperately trying to fit in. Oh, we want to fit in because we're pack people, because we want to be in communities, we want acceptance. But what if we're learning about all of those things so that we create that connection and community because we're cool with our identity and we know who we are and we know what habits we need to adopt in order to be who we are and who we want to be at our best. You want to be a champion tennis player, well, then you need the identity of a champion tennis player, which is discipline, a strict regime for training, healthy diet, exercise, like all of the things. Like, a kid probably doesn't necessarily know if they want to be that or not, but if you have a passion and you find, why aren't we in the education system identifying kids' strengths early on and going, wow, you've got a real strength for this, let's push further with that. You don't, but you've got a real strength for this thing, so let's push further with that. Do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy this? What floats your boat? We're kind of giving them a broad jack of all surface level thing, which is fine in the early years because they don't know really what at that point. They need to know a little bit about a lot of things. That's fine. They need to understand the world they live in. They need to understand the history of humanity and of our world. They need to understand a certain amount of geography and how the world works, because if we're going to look after the planet we live on, we need to understand it, right? We need to understand how it functions. We also need to understand the wider universe and what's out there, theories, and be clear on what's factual and what's theoretical, because we're learning more and more all the time. Create curiosity, evoke the imagination, let them share, let them dream, and creativity. I mean, number one thing, like art, performing arts, any art form you can think of, like expression, creative expression, that needs to be massive in education. And financial stuff, finances. Kids need to learn about financial healthiness, wealth building. But I think they need to learn about this not just from a mathematical or business sense. I think they need to learn about it from an energetic sense. I think they need to learn about money as energy. And I think they need to learn about the flow of money. I think they need to see money as a positive thing, because we've got so much ancestral and generational conditioning around money that's negative and scarcity minded. And I think that they stand no chance if they're being brought up in that space. So most adults are that way themselves, and it's hard to break, right? So in the school system, if we could be creating positivity around money and wealth building, and not leaving our kids feeling like they've got to justify wanting to make money. Why should they justify that? They may just want to, but helping them understand, like, why, what does it mean to them? For some people, they may go, I want to make a load of money so that I can go and do this thing with it and help other people because I need money to do that. Another person might go, I just want to make a load of money so that I feel like I've got freedom and choices. Like, ultimately, that's what money buys you, right? It buys you freedom and choices. It buys you options. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like finance, wealth building, investing, so economy, that kind of thing, but also with an open mind, because the landscape will change. And whilst lots of things are cyclical, they're cyclical like round and round and round, but it's also cyclical and spiraling, because when significant change comes, things are on a different plane, right? They're on a different trajectory, that they're on different rotation to what they were on before that significant change came. So yes, the education system, I think, is far from, I don't think anyone would suggest it was wonderful anyway. And it's a massive thing to change. So I don't envy the people who are responsible for change or maintaining what it is. It would be no easy task, but it's like it needs a thorough overhaul. And I don't think there have been enough tweaks along the way over the past several decades. I don't think there have been enough adjustments for it to just need a tweak and a tweak and a tweak. I feel like it's been stuck for a long time, and it now really needs a massive, like, it literally needs a refurb. It needs renovating, because it's off the mark. Yeah. And, should the school week be 5 days? Should it be the hours that it is? This is the other thing I think that's archaic. I think that, school finishes at the time, starts and finishes at the times that it does for a reason. And I agree that, the finishing time, especially for children that are getting themselves home, it's early enough that it's still daylight, so they're not coming home in the dark and those sorts of things. Great in theory, but in practice, a lot of those kids are having to go to clubs and things anyway because their parents aren't at home. And then they are having to come home in the dark. But this is what I mean by archaic. I was out walking, and there's a primary school near me, and it was the time when the kids were coming out of school. To me, it was just, time for an afternoon walk. But kids are pouring out of schools everywhere. You've got some senior school children, and they're making their way home. And then you've got the primary school children, and all the parents are there, and all the parents picking up, and the ice cream van comes along, and it's all, it's all very cute. But I'm like, these parents are just free at 3:20 in the afternoon. Like, how are they free? Do they work? Do they not work? Do they work flexibly? Do they have a job where they can work at home flexibly and now they can go get their kids? But even that's quite new. Like that wasn't how it was, certainly even when I was at school. So is there an expectation that a parent needs to be free to pick up their children at that time of day when the old school work life is 9 to 5? Like, if people have to work 9 to 5 but school finishes at 3:20. Like, how does this even fit? And I believe that's part of my point of it being archaic, in that school system was designed alongside a work system that, as sexist as this may sound, was when the man of the house went out to work 9 to 5, the woman of the house was the wife, the homemaker, and the parent, and she would be there, and she'd take the children to school and do the shopping and the housework and then pick up the children. And I know that is seriously like stereotypical on heat, but go back to tradition, and it was often like that in a large portion of families before things like divorce rates were increasing and before various different dynamics of families became more normal. Like, go back, that was the sort of the classic family unit and setup and the way things just worked. How out of date is that? And now we've kind of gone through a time when that's just not true, and into a whole nother manifestation where we're now looking at, yes, there are parents at home, but a lot of them are working for employers that allow them a certain amount of flexi time where they can work from home. They're on a laptop, they're checking into work, or they're checking out for a bit. Maybe they're doing some school run, maybe they're checking back in the evening. Like, there's definitely more flex around that. I mean, you can get an email from your accountant on a Sunday afternoon now, whereas you would never have before. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. Like, I think everyone needs to operate in a way that works for them. And you are responsible for whether or not your boundaries are open enough to receive that and go with that, or whether you go, no, I'll look at that on Monday. Like, it's your choice. But the school system hasn't changed in that way. How does that fit and how does that work? And I'm not saying I think that kids should be at school longer. I think they're at school long enough. I think that it just needs a rethink. Like, it just needs a rethink in terms of how it can work. I would argue that the length of day isn't the problem. My children finish school at 4:30 and they're in year 9 and 10 as I record this. And that's not a problem. But I think that 4 days a week would be fine. And I think that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday makes for a better weekend. A lot of kids do sport, have activities, they want to catch up with friends and have family time. That's a lot to cram into 2 days. A lot of families spend at least one weekend day, if not both, trawling around various activities. And if you have lots of children, that can be a lot of work. And then to have some downtime and some connective time as a family, like, you don't have much white space, and if there's homework to do as well, like, where's the downtime? Downtime's important. What are we teaching them? Are we teaching them to burn out and go, or are we teaching them that, and this is the day for you? Like, what if Friday was my day? I always call it Friday my day. What if we teach that? What if Friday's my day? You get to recover, you get to work on any homework that you need to do, you get to just take some time. And then there's the whole teenage thing where, particularly older teens into sort of colleges as well, starting early is not a good idea. The way their sleep develops and the way their body clocks and everything operates, without going down sleep science route here, it's different at that age. And so they do better not to be starting too early. It's a time in their lives where they do shift slightly, and sometimes temporarily, but to being up a bit later and waking up a bit later, and that's biologically healthier for their bodies. But if we're going alarm clock, up you get, go, like, what are we doing to them? We're depleting them. We are robbing them of one of their most important nutrients, which is their sleep. We are forcing their brains to start and switch on when their brain's not ready to yet. Like, I don't like that. And I think that there just needs to be a huge reevaluation of how all of this works across all of the ages. So what are the opportunities here for change? We need an education package that matches today's brains and technology. We need to teach children to leverage that technology and not to fear it. We need to really elevate creativity, imagination, human connection, emotional skills, yoga, regulation. And we need to look at schedules and models that work for the current world and operationally for families. If with considering our entrepreneurs, potentially our future high performers, we could be raising the next generation of, the workforce, the leaders, the innovators. And how is that going to happen if we have an outdated education system and environment that we're putting them in those precious years? And then a large majority will go off to university because that's just what you do, with actually no real clear intention. It should be intentional, aligned action. Not, no, don't know, so I'll just go to university and rack up a humongous bill and, in some cases not come out with a lot, or come out with something, but for what? And then go and do something else anyway, which you could have got started on years ago. It's like, go and do the thing, but know why you're doing it. Have some purpose behind it. And you've had enough time to figure out just the next thing. It doesn't have to be your life's work, but just something that nurtures who you are and who you're becoming at that tender age. So otherwise, what we're doing is we're taking them through this process and these environments, and then they're ill-prepared. We have an ill-prepared talent pool for the workforce, the leadership, the innovators, the everything. So parents that are listening now, we can influence how our children are educated. I don't know how, but I think we can. I think that more conversations like this are needed. I think that sharing thoughts on this, suggesting alternative paths, and I would love to know how you, as listeners, see the future of education and what ideas you might have. And I also think that our young people should have a say, and probably do have some really great ideas on how it could be.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, go out there and shine your light bright, because you were born to be brilliant.